I never thought I'd see the day when Kash Patel would walk into a press briefing room without a word of warning, no leaks, no teases, no cryptic posts. Just silence, until today. The clock had barely struck 9 a.m. in Washington, D.C. when the doors at the National Press Club burst open. Cameras scrambled. Reporters froze. And there he was, Kash Patel, carrying a locked steel briefcase in one hand and an unreadable look on his face. He didn't smile. He didn't greet anyone. He walked straight to the podium, placed the briefcase down, snapped it open, and the moment he unfolded the first document, the air turned electric. This, he began, holding up a page stamped top secret/SCI, wasn't supposed to exist. But it does. And it leads directly to the Obama White House. Gasps. Pens dropped. Phones went live. He laid out the first folder, classified surveillance memos, internal emails, redacted files with signature timestamps from 2015. This isn't about politics anymore, Kash said, scanning the crowd. It's about what was done under the guise of power. I'm here to expose something the American public was never meant to see. What followed was a timeline, a surgically precise account of covert authorizations, misuse of intelligence resources, and high-level involvement. Reporters who had doubted him now looked paralyzed. No one dared interrupt. Kash glanced toward the back of the room and added, "And this is only the beginning." The moment was volcanic. The ripple. Immediate. Within 30 minutes, 5 news networks cut their programming. Congressional staffers were seen sprinting down Capitol Hill corridors. And in Chicago, Barack Obama reportedly canceled a private fundraiser and went dark. Shockwaves weren't just sweeping the nation. They were about to rattle its very foundation. Back at the Capitol, the situation was spiraling fast. A closed-door emergency session was called within 2 hours of Kash Patel's briefing. Senior members of the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees were ordered in immediately. Phones were confiscated. Transcripts were sealed. But a single phrase leaked out through a staffer's hot mic: "If this is legit, we're dealing with a constitutional crisis." Meanwhile, Patel wasn't done. From a secure location, he sat down with a small group of vetted journalists, names trusted for their integrity, not their networks. What they were shown next wasn't just paper. It was video. Time-stamped. Verifiable. Unedited. In the footage, an Obama-era national security advisor was caught discussing the unofficial chain of command used to bypass standard FISA oversight. The name Obama was never said outright, but the references were crystal clear. He signed off on it personally. We needed cover from the very top. Patel paused the video. "You see," he said, "this wasn't rogue staffers. It was systemic." Across the country, citizens were glued to live streams. #ObamaFiles and #Kash Patel trended within seconds. People demanded answers. Protests formed outside federal buildings in D.C., Dallas, and Denver. Every outlet was forced to cover it. Back in the West Wing, senior Biden officials reportedly held a classified meeting. The subject? Containment. But for Kash, containment was never the goal. He looked straight at the camera and declared, "I'm calling on Congress to issue subpoenas. This is no longer a matter of interpretation. This is evidence." And then he dropped the kicker: "There's a second set of documents, sealed. If I'm silenced or stopped, they will be released. Publicly. Fully." The threat was real. The message was clear. And somewhere behind heavily secured windows in Martha's Vineyard, Barack Obama was watching. By dawn the next morning, Washington was on edge. Federal agents were seen swarming a nondisclosed archive facility in Northern Virginia. Patel's claims had prompted something rarely seen, a quiet but aggressive DOJ retrieval operation. Boxes were carried out. No one spoke to the press. But Kash Patel was already 5 moves ahead. From a safe location disclosed only to a small legal team and one high-level Senate contact, Patel prepared the next release, this time, targeting what he called the invisible firewall. At exactly 11 a.m., a second batch of documents dropped through encrypted servers to a hand-picked group of congressional leaders, whistleblower attorneys, and independent analysts. These files contained communications between the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and senior White House aides, some of whom had long since left the public eye. But the timestamps? Again, chilling, June 2016. August 2016. October 2016. Right in the heart of an election year. And they weren't just watching political opponents, they were actively coordinating. One internal memo stood out. It referenced a briefing prepared, per POTUS's instruction, concerning individuals posing threats to stability narratives. Kash looked at the camera again, this time with undeniable conviction. If the sitting president directed surveillance on journalists, on campaigns, or on citizens, we're looking at the abuse of the highest office in the land. The fallout began immediately. 2 former White House aides lawyered up. A former CIA official abruptly canceled a media tour. A high-profile tech exec who had once partnered with government data initiatives publicly distanced himself, tweeting only, "I had no idea it went that high." And behind closed doors, a single question echoed through the halls of Congress: if this reaches Obama, what happens next? By sunset, news anchors weren't asking if it was real. They were asking how long it had been covered up. That evening, under heavy escort, Kash Patel was moved to a secure federal facility for his protection. Anonymous threats had poured in by the hour. A cyber attack briefly knocked out his legal team's private servers. But the backup drives had already been dispersed. Patel had planned for everything. Meanwhile, President Biden remained conspicuously silent. No statement. No press conference. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre deflected every question, citing ongoing investigations and national security concerns. But the pressure was mounting. Republicans in the House demanded immediate hearings. Jim Jordan issued subpoenas before midnight. Senators like Josh Hawley and Rand Paul called for the appointment of a special independent counsel. Even some Democrats, quietly, off the record, began to whisper about protecting the legacy of the party rather than defending a ghost from the past. Inside the FBI, internal rifts exploded. A classified memo leaked from a mid-level agent accused senior brass of burying FISA violations for political purposes. That agent has since disappeared from public view. His office has been sealed. But the most explosive turn came when Patel released audio. Clear. Undeniable. Familiar voices. In the recording, a senior Obama-era intelligence official said the following: "We briefed the president. He understood the risk. He greenlit the operations, provided they left no fingerprints." Kash stared into the camera, his face grave. "They left fingerprints. I have them all." Social media platforms struggled to control the narrative. Independent channels exploded in traffic. Cable networks split down partisan lines, but even some anchors on CNN broke from the script, calling the evidence disturbing and potentially impeachable had it surfaced in real time. Barack Obama? Still no public comment. But that changed late in the night. A jet was spotted taking off from Martha's Vineyard en route to D.C. Former President Obama was aboard. At 3:42 a.m., Andrews Air Force Base lit up. Former President Barack Obama had landed. No reporters were allowed near the tarmac. No statements were made. A black Suburban with government plates whisked him into the darkness, flanked by unmarked SUVs. No one could confirm where he was headed, but sources close to Capitol Security said this wasn't a visit. It was containment. By morning, headlines blared: Obama returns to D.C. in shadow of explosive intel scandal, Patel's tapes shake Washington to ITS core, deep state. Or deep truth. On Capitol Hill, security doubled. Armed Capitol Police took post outside Judiciary and Intelligence Committee rooms. Kash Patel, now under full U.S. Marshal protection, was scheduled to testify in a closed session by noon. Inside the hearing, sources confirmed Patel submitted a sealed envelope to the committee chair, marked, "Presidential Knowledge, Eyes Only." The room reportedly fell silent as they opened it. Inside, a signed presidential directive dated July 12, 2016. Its title, Covert Surveillance Operations Authorization, Domestic Watch List Expansion. The final line read, "Proceed with full discretion. This must remain off-book." It was signed Barack H. Obama. A sitting senator reportedly whispered, "My God." Outside the chamber, the nation trembled. State AGs in Texas, Florida, and Ohio announced joint investigations into federal surveillance abuse. Civil liberties groups launched lawsuits. Protesters on both sides swarmed federal courthouses, waving signs like, "Cash New. Truth over Legacy. Nobody is above the law." Yet amid the chaos, Kash Patel remained composed. Standing before a sea of cameras, he spoke, "This isn't about revenge. This is about restoring trust. If the presidency can be weaponized once, it can happen again. We either confront this now, or lose the republic forever." Behind him, a sealed courtroom door creaked open. A federal judge had called an emergency session. And for the first time in modern history, the phrase, "former president under investigation," was no longer hypothetical. Inside the federal courtroom, tension gripped the air like a vice. U.S. District Judge Meredith Lowell presided over the emergency session. No cameras. No press. Only federal prosecutors, Intelligence Committee staff, and two uninvited but impossible to refuse attendees, Kash Patel, Barack Obama, seated across the room from one another. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Patel, sharp, calm, and armed with documents; Obama, stone-faced, flanked by his legal team and Secret Service agents who hadn't left his side for 48 hours. Judge Lowell wasted no time. "Mr. Patel, you claim the sitting president at the time knowingly authorized surveillance beyond statutory limits. Do you have evidence?" Patel replied without blinking. "Yes, Your Honor. And it's now in your possession." The room fell silent as the judge reviewed the folder marked Exhibit H. Inside, email chains from intelligence briefings, a classified appendix signed by the National Security Advisor, and metadata logs tracing data collection across domestic newsrooms, campaign entities, and private citizens. Then came the bombshell, a direct communication from the White House counsel's office, dated August 3, 2016, POTUS is aware. Recommend shielding names for plausible deniability. Use auxiliary review routes via Five Eyes Alliance. The judge looked up slowly. Even the prosecutors seemed stunned. But the real shift came when a longtime intelligence officer, subpoenaed quietly days earlier, was called to the stand under seal. Known only as Witness Redline, he confirmed what everyone feared: yes. The president was briefed weekly. "I was present." Back outside, the country began to fracture into two furious halves. One side saw Patel as a patriot, a modern-day whistleblower risking everything. The other claimed it was a political witch hunt, timed to inflame an already fragile democracy. But no matter the lens, one fact remained: for the first time in U.S. history, a federal judge officially accepted evidence that a former president may have authorized covert domestic surveillance in violation of statutory law. And back at the White House, aides to President Biden knew something had changed. Because this wasn't just about the past anymore. It was creeping closer to the present, and fast. By the next morning, all illusions of normalcy in D.C. had vanished. C-SPAN viewership shattered records as Congress reconvened for an emergency bipartisan intelligence session. Former President Obama's legal team had filed a motion to suppress certain classified documents from public release, citing national security threats. But the motion was rejected, unanimously. Even longtime establishment allies began to distance themselves. Senator Joe Manchin told reporters, "If these documents are authentic, and all signs point that way, then the American people deserve full transparency. Party loyalty ends where the Constitution begins." The ripple effect was massive. Former Obama administration officials began lawyering up. Leaked flight logs showed a sharp uptick in travel between D.C., San Francisco, and Zurich. Word spread fast that encrypted offshore storage had been used to bury communications, and Patel was already steps ahead. He released a digital forensic map through his legal team, a chain of IP logs, data packet routes, and metadata that traced back to White House Wi-Fi during sensitive surveillance briefings. Cable outlets had no choice. They turned full coverage. Then came the moment that would define the scandal. At a live town hall event in Atlanta, a young student, nervous but composed, asked Barack Obama point-blank, "Did you authorize surveillance on U.S. citizens for political purposes?" Obama didn't dodge. But his answer was calculated. "Decisions in the Oval Office are complex. We relied on the best intelligence advice available. If mistakes were made, they were not made in bad faith." The audience was stunned. Because he didn't deny it. Within seconds, Patel's team issued a rebuttal: "It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And the documents prove it." That same night, Kash dropped a third wave, one the public wasn't ready for: text exchanges between White House aides and journalists, coordinating leaks, smearing political opponents, and using intelligence briefings as fuel for narratives. The media itself was now implicated. Several anchors went silent. A primetime resignation hit MSNBC. Legal departments went into overdrive. The scandal had expanded. No longer just a government issue, this was now a war on trust, truth, and the very machinery of democracy. And Kash Patel? He wasn't finished yet. In less than 72 hours, Washington had gone from guarded denial to full-scale panic. The Department of Justice, under extraordinary public pressure, announced the appointment of a special prosecutor to investigate the Obama-era surveillance scandal. The man selected? Retired federal judge Elliot Warren, known for taking down a major intelligence misuse case 2 decades prior. His first words at the podium: "This won't be a political exercise. This will be a reckoning." Meanwhile, the mainstream media was imploding under the weight of Patel's latest revelation: direct collaboration between White House officials and media executives to preemptively discredit whistleblowers and manufacture public consensus. One damning text exchange revealed a senior Obama communications director texting a national news editor, "Run with the narrative. Patel's people are a fringe operation. We'll feed you language tomorrow." The editor replied with a thumbs-up emoji and, chillingly, "Standard playbook. Got it." Kash Patel took the stage again, this time not in a press room, but in front of the House Oversight Committee. The tension was suffocating. Flanked by a constitutional lawyer and his longtime investigator, Patel laid out what he called the 3 pillars of deception: weaponized intelligence, unlawful surveillance, and data harvesting. Narrative control, strategic coordination with mainstream media. Institutional immunity, internal mechanisms to suppress exposure and evade accountability. Each pillar came with documentation, timestamps, and named individuals. The evidence wasn't just pointing to Barack Obama, it was showing a carefully architected system. Committee Chair James Comer leaned forward and asked, "Are you saying the Obama administration used intelligence agencies as political tools against American citizens?" Kash didn't flinch. "Not saying. Proving." Outside the chamber, the crowd surged. Protesters, both outraged and in disbelief, clashed in front of the Capitol. National Guard units were deployed for precaution. But it wasn't just the public watching anymore. Behind closed doors, former allies of Obama were meeting with legal counsel. Several of them were considering testifying, flipping, as it was now called in D.C. circles. Because Patel had more. And everyone knew it. The storm had officially turned inward. In a stunning development, 2 former Obama-era intelligence officials, one from the NSA and another from the DNI, agreed to testify under oath in exchange for limited immunity. The conditions were strict: full cooperation, zero omissions, and all documentation turned over to Special Prosecutor Elliot Warren. The first hearing was closed door, but leaks were inevitable. According to sources, one official revealed that top-level, verbal directives from the Oval Office bypassed traditional paper trails, and that internal staffers referred to them as clean ops operations that left no fingerprints unless someone inside talked. That someone had finally talked. Kash Patel, informed of the testimony, issued a rare public statement: "They never expected this to see daylight. But it's morning now." Across the country, the consequences were starting to compound. A Pulitzer-winning journalist resigned after internal emails linked her to coordinated disinformation about FISA court abuses. Civil liberties groups launched a class action lawsuit against the federal government. International headlines began appearing: America's deep state crisis, what did Obama know? The Guardian, former U.S. president implicated in domestic surveillance scandal. Der Spiegel. The White House issued a brief, tense press release: President Biden reaffirms his belief in transparency, justice, and institutional accountability. He will not interfere with the special prosecutor's work. But inside the West Wing, the mood was described as one misstep away from collapse. Then came the next wave. Patel released internal FISA application memos, redacted, yes, but irrefutably damning. They showed doctored evidence submitted to secure surveillance warrants. These weren't mistakes. They were deliberate alterations. All approved under an executive framework expanded during Obama's second term. The public erupted. Millions called for retroactive hearings. Protests turned into permanent encampments outside major federal buildings. #Obamagate trended worldwide. But the final twist was still loading. Because as Kash's legal team prepared one last sealed file for delivery to the special prosecutor, Patel issued one cryptic sentence to the press: "The next name that appears will stun the world." No one knew what to expect. But everyone knew it was coming. The final file arrived at the special prosecutor's office under armed courier escort. Labeled simply, Project Echo. What lay inside wasn't just a link to the past, it was the final, irrefutable connection tying it all together. Documents, internal memos, and private meeting transcripts showed that the covert surveillance campaign was not limited to political operatives, journalists, and whistleblowers. It had extended to sitting members of Congress. The targets? A ranking Senate Intelligence Committee member. 2 House representatives, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat. And 1 high-profile presidential candidate in 2016. Each had been monitored under the guise of foreign influence suspicion, with data collected via shadowed FISA extensions and parallel Five Eyes surveillance cooperation. None were ever notified. None had consented. And in the middle of it all, a redacted meeting summary dated October 14, 2016. Attendees: White House Chief of Staff, CIA Director, Attorney General, President Barack Obama. The notes were brief, but devastating, discussed continuance of Intel ops into Q1 2017. POTUS agreed. Long game more important than optics. The note was initialed: BHO Special Prosecutor Warren. Took only 1 hour to draft the recommendation. His official memo, read aloud before a closed Congressional Joint Committee, ended with these words: "The findings suggest a deliberate abuse of executive authority, coordinated misuse of federal surveillance resources, and potential violations of constitutional protections. I recommend the immediate formation of a grand jury." Outside, the world waited. Reporters pressed for comments. Networks broadcast special reports. Social media reached digital gridlock. Then Kash Patel stepped in front of the cameras one final time. No podium. No notes. Just a quiet, measured voice. This wasn't about a party. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the people, being heard, being told the truth, and being protected from those who think power is a shield against justice. Today, We pulled that shield away. And then he walked off. No questions. No applause. Within hours, Barack Obama's legal team acknowledged grand jury proceedings had begun. For the first time in U.S. history, a former president stood at the center of an active federal investigation for abuse of executive surveillance power. The nation had changed. And the shockwaves were still spreading. 3 weeks later, America stood on the edge of something it had never experienced before. The grand jury proceedings against former President Barack Obama had officially begun under a federal seal, but key information inevitably leaked. The scope of the investigation expanded beyond surveillance. It now included obstruction, destruction of classified records, and illegal coordination with private entities. Meanwhile, Kash Patel had vanished from public view. His testimony was complete. His files had been submitted. His job, he said, was done. But just when the nation thought the storm had peaked, it struck again. A confidential witness, known only as Falcon 12, emerged through the special prosecutor's channel. This witness had served in a covert liaison role between U.S. intelligence agencies and social media platforms during the 2016 to 2017 window. And what they revealed stunned even hardened investigators. There were strategic data-sharing pipelines between federal agencies and private platforms. They weren't just flagging content. They were silencing political narratives, based on keyword triggers provided directly by the White House. The implication was clear: the Obama administration hadn't just monitored threats. They had shaped perception. In secret. And at scale. At a historic joint press conference, Special Prosecutor Warren stood before a silent crowd and made the announcement: a formal indictment will be prepared pending full grand jury review. No one is above the law, not even a former president. Shock turned to reality. And for the first time in U.S. history, a president's legacy, influence, and actions were being dissected under the rule of law, not media spin, not political bias. But Kash Patel, now living quietly in a safe location, released one final statement through his legal team: let this not be remembered as a scandal, but as a correction. A realignment of government to the will of the people. Not the other way around. In a small town in Ohio, a father turned to his daughter watching the coverage and said, "You're seeing history." And she replied, "You mean justice?" He nodded. Because in that moment, the nation didn't feel red or blue. It just felt awake. A precise account of covert authorizations, misuse of intelligence resources, and high-level involvement. Reporters who had doubted him now looked paralyzed. No one dared interrupt. Kash glanced toward the back of the room and added, "And this is only the beginning." The moment was volcanic. The ripple. Immediate. Within 30 minutes, 5 news networks cut their programming. Congressional staffers were seen sprinting down Capitol Hill corridors. And in Chicago, Barack Obama reportedly canceled a private fundraiser and went dark. Shockwaves weren't just sweeping the nation. They were about to rattle its very foundation. Back at the Capitol, the situation was spiraling fast. A closed-door emergency session was called within 2 hours of Kash Patel's briefing. Senior members of the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees were ordered in immediately. Phones were confiscated. Transcripts were sealed. But a single phrase leaked out through a staffer's hot mic: "If this is legit, we're dealing with a constitutional crisis." Meanwhile, Patel wasn't done. From a secure location, he sat down with a small group of vetted journalists, names trusted for their integrity, not their networks. What they were shown next wasn't just paper. It was video. Time-stamped. Verifiable. Unedited. In the footage, an Obama-era national security advisor was caught discussing the unofficial chain of command used to bypass standard FISA oversight. The name Obama was never said outright, but the references were crystal clear. He signed off on it personally. We needed cover from the very top. Patel paused the video. "You see," he said, "this wasn't rogue staffers. It was systemic. Across the country, citizens were glued to live streams. Hashtag Obama Files and hashtag Kash Patel trended within seconds. People demanded answers. Protests formed outside federal buildings in D.C., Dallas, and Denver. Every outlet was forced to cover it. Back in the West Wing, senior Biden